So how do we know if the chain is blunt? Well, if it's nice and sharp, it will actually produce saw chips. But if it's blunt, it will actually produce saw dust. So what would be the number one cause of that? Would actually be cutting close to the ground. Because what you don't want to do is touch dirt. It will instantly dull the chain. Now if you do that, let's learn how to sharpen it. So the first thing we need to do when sharpening a chainsaw is fix the chainsaw securely. Now once that's done, we're going to need a few tools. We're going to need a round file and its guide, a flat file, a depth gauge, and a marker to mark the first cutter we're about to sharpen. So the first tool we're going to need is our round file and guide. Now with the chainsaw, we need to release the chain brake. And what's that allowing us to do is actually freely move the chain while we're sharpening it. So, why is it so important to use a guide? Well, very simply, it does two things for us. One is it keeps the file nice and high, meaning that we're only filing the cutter and we don't file down into the link. The second part is it also gives us the angle to draw the file through, because chainsaws can be different and they're going to have different angles. Once you find what the actual angle is, and starting on the first link, which we've marked, we simply draw the file through in a forward motion, never backwards, but also with a little bit of pressure towards the motor. And we're going to do this about 3 to 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you'll also notice that I'm holding the file and guide horizontal, so as flat as possible. Now if you're happy with that link there, what you can then do is move it forward and then continue on with every single cutter. Now if you notice, what I'm doing here is actually sharpening every second cutter. And the reason being is because the cutters are positioned on the right and the left hand side of the chain. So once I've found my mark and I've completed the whole entire left side, when I need to sharpen the right hand side, what I need to do is either flip the chainsaw around or move to the other side. The reason being is what I'm trying to avoid is by leaning over the chainsaw and coming back over this way, I'm not going to get the correct pressure, meaning one side's going to be sharpened better than the other. And this can lead to an angled cut, which you don't want. So now the cutters are nice and sharp, what we need is our flat file and depth gauge. Let me show you what you need to do with these. So, when you have your cutters like so, and they're nice and sharp, we actually have what we call a depth gauge at the front of the cutter. Now what these do is limits the amount of material or timber that passes into the cutter. Now because the cutters are on an angle, as we file them, so it's getting sharper, what's going to happen is they're going to go down on an angle. Now what that means is if the cutter's going down, it means the depth gauge is coming up. So what we need to do every about 7 to 8 times we sharpen the chain is we need to make sure that the depth gauge is lowered with the cutters. And by simply putting a depth gauge over the cutters, it will expose this section here, which is the depth gauge. And if there's any part protruding, we get our flat file and we file this down. And as I said, at the end of the day, it's only about 7 to 8 times that you need to do this. So after checking a couple of the depth gauges, there's nothing coming off. So there's no point checking the rest of them and the job's done. So for more tips and tricks, go to our how-to videos on ryobi.com.au or check out our YouTube channel.
RYOBI, a cut above.